Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Valocity. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And this week, an absolute banger. We get asked this question all the time. Why aren't rents going up at the same pace as property costs?
Okay, C and B, things are changing a little bit. We've got a very exciting new partnership with Valocity. Mike, for those who aren't out there in the property game, who are Valocity?
So Valocity are New Zealand's largest property valuation outfit tool website. We primarily use them to get all of our data on properties when we're looking at them for customers or maybe for ourselves. So things like, what's the value of the property? What was it last sold for? Who currently owns it? Who's it mortgaged to? All of that sort of juicy information that you don't quite get by just looking at the house on Trade Me. That's what we use Valocity for. Now, you kind of might look at that and go, okay, yeah, that's a little bit of data and nice to have. Valocity actually operate internationally. So they operate in a number of countries around the world, and they have partnership data agreements, which means actually it's not just property data they have. They are linked to things like building costs, they can find out about average incomes, all of these sorts of things. So yeah, a ton of information, very excited.
Yeah, so they've got a huge amount of property data and data kind of linked around property as well. They're going to give us the data. We're going to talk to you about it. And it should lead towards some of the best property education in terms of data going around in New Zealand.
And banter.
And a little bit of bants. We like to think we're funnier than we are, though.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about why aren't rents keeping up with costs. Now, before we talk about it, I want Ravi, can we just quickly bring up maybe a year ago, we did a predictions episode. Let's have a quick look.
Rents are going to increase 30% over the next 2 years.
So, Mike, we thought rents would go up 30% over 2 years.
Yeah.
It ain't looking that way.
Nah, it's not looking that way. And I guess we'll run into some of the reasons behind that, but I guess a bit of the natural cause of that is there's always going to be a natural ceiling on how high you can raise rents. Like with the cost of everything else going up, it's not like you can just go, okay, all of a sudden this is going to be $1,000 a week and it was 600.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to my dad about it the other day and he was saying to me, I don't get it. Like my tenants just left and I'm going to end up with less rent than I'm currently getting. He's going, interest rates have tripled. So as a property investor, my costs have gone up. Rates have gone up. Insurance has gone up. All costs towards landlords have increased. Why aren't rents going up? So once again, Valocity have given us the information opposed to just an opinion. We've got the data.
It'd be actually, I think before we jump into that, it'd be great if maybe property investors and landlords to do that similar thing that the banks do where they all just raise everything at the same time.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like
when they're working together.
When the petrol stations talk to each other and go, I'm going to increase my prices, you increasing your prices.
You do it at 9, I'll do it at 9:10.
Yeah. So if we look at actually, before we talk about why rents aren't increasing at the rate that they're expected, let's actually look at how much they have increased by. So over 2023 so far, over the past 12 months, they've increased by 5.3%, which is actually a drop year on year. And Ravi, if you bring up the graph talking about a national 3-bedroom median rental price, Mike, it's definitely not 30% over 2 years.
No, it's not. And it is still going up. But if you look at that and go, okay, but it's still going up at 5% per year, 4% per year. Okay, that's fine. But you've got to remember that at the moment, inflation's going up by 7%. And when we're looking at the costs associated with an investment property or any property, the large driver of that cost is the interest rate. So yeah, don't get me wrong, like everything else in the consumer price index, basket of goods might be going up, your cabbages, your petrol, whatever. But actually, for a property, that interest rate is one of the massive drivers of cost.
Yeah, so if you're looking at, and I would say quite logically, which is where the prediction came from last year, going rents are going to increase dramatically because costs have gone up dramatically for landlords. We've looked at the wrong side of the ledger.
Yeah.
It's a demand and supply game. Now, granted, there is starting to be some commentary around, are property investors going to stay being property investors? But if we focus right now on the person renting the house, the renters, their wages have gone up 4.3% to March over 12 months, while rents have increased, inflation has increased, and while costs to landlords have gone up, It don't matter, Mike. If your costs are going up, but I can't afford it,
Yeah.
it's just not going to work, is it?
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I sort of talked about with that natural ceiling of where you can set a price. At some point, people just can't pay anymore. And landlords need to be really cognizant of that. And the market is also going to determine that to a degree as well.
Yeah. So once again, if you're a landlord and going, it's just a matter of time, rents are going to increase, they have to increase because my costs are going up and all the landlords are going to agree on this. It's just not how it's going to work and what the data is telling us and why rents aren't increasing. Mike, maybe if we jump back to some of the cost of ownership and the fact that landlords are feeling the pinch, where are some of the places where costs are going up?
Yeah, so I mean, associated with the house, you're always going to have rates, right? And the Auckland Council just announced their biggest rate rise,
honestly,
in a long time. So that hits you directly in the pocket, and that is a cost incurred by the landlord. This is not a commercial property usually where you can pass everything through. So that's a 7% increase just this year alone. And then some of the other territories have announced higher increases than that too. The other one, insurance. Now, I don't know if you've been experiencing either kind of freaky weather lately, James, but all of that damage, the cyclones, the floods, the hurricanes, everything, even right back to the earthquakes in Christchurch, has all increased the insurance premiums on houses. And rightly or wrongly so, every time you dial up the risk for an insurance company, they dial up how much they want to be compensated for it.
Yeah, so it's not just about the mortgage costs that we're talking about. All of these other costs are starting to add up, which are putting more pressure on investors.
Yeah.
Mike, the other big one, if we bring up graph number 2, is around building costs. And this was a huge story, probably especially last year with getting supplies into the country.
Yep.
But if we look in May 2022, year-on-year building costs were up to 19.2% increase. Still 12.1%, right? So to build anything, to renovate anything, it's bloody expensive.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to see any real release and pressure in that area of the market going forward, right? And again, if we come back to what's happening in the economy, you have a large number of immigration coming back into New Zealand. You've got some pressure in localized areas of the economy geographically, like places that were hit by the cyclone and the flooding. So I just can't see that building cost coming back at all. And another real interesting point to factor in with the building cost is, I think it's something like consents and like permits and that type of expense globally is around 2% of the cost of building a house, whereas in New Zealand it is like over triple that, right? Like it's
the
like
freaking councils.
Yeah, and you can see here that actually what that does mean is that rebuilds and new builds are taking longer. And that holding cost is increased to the developer or the person who's building the house, which means, again, although the cost of materials is going up, that is another way that cost is going up as well without the actual inflation on the material.
Bring back Tim Shadbolt, I say. He'll fix all the council problems.
Could he fix his own problems?
You hear he asked to have a statue built of him in Invercargill.
Didn't you try and do that out on High Street?
Well, very funny. Just side note, Tim Shadbolt was like, look, I personally would never ask for a statue to be built of myself. However, enough people have come to me and gone, I think a statue should be built. Yeah. And I've gone, you know what? They've got some good points here. I think they should build a statue.
Honestly, I'm going to use that every time I say, look, I personally would never. However, enough people have come
I'm far too humble. All right, let's jump back to the increase in cost. The other one, which our accounting team are starting to see, and the noise is just going to increase and increase, is the interest deductibility. Yeah. So winding back to Labor's changes around property investment. So the interest on the mortgage was a expense that you could put in your tax return, which means you could save quite a lot of money. For existing properties, that's slowly getting phased out. So it was 100%, then it was 75%. This year is going to be 50%. Yep. And then the year after that, 25%, and then 0. That is an increase in cost to landlords as well.
Yeah, 100%. But look.
Well played there.
I know we're talking about this cost, but to rewind a little bit and bring it back to the big one, it's mortgage rates. Now, everybody knows that mortgage rates have effectively tripled over the last couple of years. And, it was a record low of 2.4% in 2021. to a decade high of 6.5% in 2023. And I'll tell you what, those retail rates just went up again last week. We're now looking at 1-year fixes in the 7s for the carded rates, and that is pretty depressing. So if you think about that cost tripling over the last couple of years, what does that look like in terms of here's how much I'm paying in interest, here's how much I'm getting in rent. If we could pull up the graph, please, to have a look at this. Now, you can see in Jan 2021, the weekly interest payment on a $700,000 loan, $319 a week. Seems very reasonable, doesn't it, James? Now, if I'm earning $620 a week in my rental income, great, happy days, making a profit, gonna have to pay some tax at the end of the year, don't worry about it. However, you can see that around sort of that May, July 2022 is when that intersection of those two things met, and that interest cost has just continued to increase. So that weekly rent has only gone up from $620 to $690 to July 23, but that interest cost is now at $901 per week. So look, that really is the big one for property investors who are carrying a lot of debt on these properties.
I mean, when you talk about percentages, sometimes the impact can be lost a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you look at these numbers and dollar figures and go, this graph isn't over that long of a period of time. And if you're going, why has the noise stopped? Why are we in a recession? This is why we're in a recession.
Yeah.
Is we went from on these numbers, making $300 a week to losing about $300 a week. And that doesn't even factor in. We spoke about the rates. We spoke about the interest deductibility. We spoke about the insurance, maintenance, accountants. It's very expensive. That graph, Mike, is it's a lot.
I mean, it paints a fairly obvious picture, right? Is like actually the cash flows on these properties are now negative. And, we have a way of framing it to property investors where I'm saying, or we're saying like, hey, if I gave you back, if it's going to cost you 15 grand a year, but I'm giving you back 30 grand a year, that's still a good investment. It's just a hard pill to swallow when it comes with the increase of all the other costs and the fact that actually I was making money on this and now I'm not.
Well, it's also nicer when I'm making 35 grand a year in capital gains and making $100, $200 a week in cash flow, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got our next graph, which kind of brings the point through even more in terms of what percentage of properties are cash flow positive versus cash flow negative.
Yeah.
So just as a quick reminder, cash flow positive, cash flow negative. Are you making money after all of your costs and rent, or are you losing money? So Mike, cash flow positive, do you want to talk us through those numbers?
Yeah, look. So, I mean, the proportion of sales that were cash flow positive has dropped a lot, right? Like even when you look at the graph, you can see that, hey, most of the investment properties that are selling on the market now are not cash flow positive. No real surprise there. And we're talking through that with our investors at the moment, right? Like, and we know that markets work in cycles, interest rates will come back down, things will change. But you've got to make sure that you can ride out the bad times. You can't just be making plans for these sorts of things, thinking rates are going to be 2% forever. It's going to be fine. Give me 5 more houses, please. And, one of the things that just kind of does show and does stress is that actually there are going to be some people in a difficult situation out there in the market who are now looking at these and going, I actually can't afford this. I did not run the numbers properly. I didn't think this through enough. I wanted a house because everyone at the barbecue's got one. And maybe there's going to be some opportunities for people to actually get into the market. Yeah.
And once again, if there is any way you can hold during the current market, it's, you probably lost on like a $900,000 property, a couple of $100,000. And if you sell right now, if there's no other way, make sure to talk to a professional first, but you are going to crystallize and lose a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
And if you're saving, I don't know, as a household, $10,000 a year, that might be 20 years of savings if you crystallize those losses right now. So if there is any way that you can hold on to that property and ride it through, it's not a thing where, it's going to be all sunshines and lollipops tomorrow. But if you can find a way to hold through the next couple of years, holding during times like this is really important.
Yeah. And we always come back to, have a chat to the experts early, right? And it's about not putting your head in the sand. If you are in a position where the cash flow is negative and things are getting tight, it's having a discussion around what can you actually do and how can we fix this?
Yeah. these numbers, Mike. So in Q1 2021, 90% were cash flow positive, and current date, only 10% are cash flow positive.
Probably everyone in Gisborne.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, I tell you what, Gizzy, some great rental yields out there, Palmerston North. That starting point of Q1, it tells a story of like, look how far back it's gone. But the point of Q1 2021 was it was artificially high, right? Like there was a sugar high of how low interest rates were, which if you use that as a starting point, makes everything just look...
100%. And we get the same sentiment just when people are asking us about, interest rates are really high at the moment. I'm like, yeah, interest rates are a little bit high now, but they look a lot higher because they were so low. And the interesting thing about that graph is, the cash flow positive and the 1 year fixed rate, you can see how similar that line is and the inflection there on like, actually it's just as those interest rates increase, all of a sudden that cash flow becomes negative.
Yeah. Look, so there's a lot of pain to property investors and landlords at the moment. The other probably quite interesting thing I'm starting to see as well is just a little bit of commentary in the news going, what is the impact if landlords start to move out of the market? And what's the impact to, there's already lots of people in short-term accommodation and there's a shortage of rental properties in the country. A little bit of commentary along those sort of lines. The key takeaway here is while there's a lot of pain on landlords, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, Mike, but it's not the part that moves the equation. It's the people who are renting, all of their costs are going up. Their income is not keeping up. So for you to go, as a percentage, my costs, in some of these graphs, the cost might be 20, 30, 40% on the landlord. It doesn't matter because your renter can't afford and it's just a demand supply game.
Yeah, and we see that everywhere in the market, right? I think, and you see every time there's intervention in the market, you see a distortion. And that's really evident here with these figures is when the rates were artificially low, we start to see a distortion in the housing market and then a correction, which is what we're going through now. Yeah.
So a huge thanks to Valocity for giving us all of this data. The really good thing about all of this data right now is we get asked questions about, Mike, I'm worried there might be too many townhouses in New Zealand or why are rents not keeping up? If you've got a question like that and want to see the data to support whatever is happening and why it is happening, put it in the comments, reach out, let us know. Thank you very much for joining. Please review, please subscribe. We'll catch you next time.
Cheers.